could, now that we're live, if you could point or direct your comments to the actual like comment section, whether it's on YouTube or Periscope and etc. That will actually help me be able to see it a lot better. Because right now I'm looking at a screen which is mirrored, right, and it's really awkward to try and read text which is mirrored because I'm looking at a teleprompter basically. Right, so hello and thank you, those who have turned up live. Thank you very much for your time. This is basically going to be an awesome session of Proto. This is Proto. Basically, this is where we have a look at first principles design of all the awesome characteristics that crypto enables, right? So crypto enables us to have sort of rich new experiences in sort of three particular domains, one can say. So, in communication, that's the obvious one, right? You've got HTTPS and, all sorts of, sort of encrypted communication, etc. So communication, and then you've got compensation, right? So crypto incentives, tokenomics, etc. And then thirdly, hang on, I think something's not working here. Give me a moment, folks. Technical, new window. Okay. Okay. Un moment, so like 10 seconds. Okay, cool. It's back working now. Yeah, so communication, compensation, and collaboration, right? These three fundamental things, like crypto actually, fundamentally sort of changes them. And what we sort of look at in Proto, as I said earlier, is sort of looking at how these particular sort of techniques or tools enable a sort of a new paradigm to be opened up, right? In terms of being able to actually, build new and interesting experiences and services. So, without harping on too much, I'm just gonna quickly jump into a Figma file here, which will actually present, which will present a good sort of overview of what. There we go. Haha. Working in this mirrored thing is really tricky. But anyway, okay. So yeah, that's Proto. Quickly jump into this bit here. So now, what kind of person, right, is sort of watching this? I suppose the idea here is that it's not the person who is like super technical. It's someone who can be technical, but sort of, I suppose, like code related kind of stuff. They haven't got the knowledge or the skill set within the domain to actually feel competent. And the idea is to actually break down the front end aspect of design, I suppose, as well as the back end. And all in all, actually, fundamentally, what we're trying to arrive at, what actually crypto enables, is for folks to get up in the morning and have a sense of purpose and being, right? A good thing that kind of orients us in thinking about this is the Japanese term called Ikigai, which basically means reason for being, and it can be broken down into these sort of four overlapping sort of circles of Venn diagram. At the top here, you've got the first circle, which represents what you love. And the second circle here, you've got what you're good at. And then the third one here is what is needed, right? So like what the world needs. And then the fourth one here is what you get paid for, right? So actually, let me just try and zoom out and see if I can get all of them in there. Yay, there we go, yes. Right, and then in the center there, you've got Ikigai, basically. It's a good balance of what you love doing, what you're good at, what the world needs, as well as what you get paid for, right? So in a way, the inspiration, the the purpose behind proto is to basically, to get the audience to get to such a place, right? Because crypto actually enables that, right? And right now we're living through a pandemic, and the shift of location sort of dependent work is, has completely sort of been turned on its head. So people are going to be able to work from anywhere, and part of that, sort of that wide opening market, sort of not only sort of opens up geography, it actually opens up, sort of like avenues, new avenues in terms of, learning new skill sets, solving new problems, meeting new people, right? Going back to the whole collaboration thing, right? Okay, so that's that. Now let's, ooh, okay, now let's jump into what we're going to be talking about today. It's going to be exciting. So, right, we're going to be talking about decentralized identity, as the title actually sort of alluded to. So, we're going to be advancing the conversation which you had previously, last week, where we basically just sort of like kind of had a broad view, look at what, can you hear me okay? Actually, could you? Yeah, it just occurred to me. Anyone watching, could you just drop a message on the live stream to let me know if you can actually hear me? Okay, cool, cool. Snowball. Okay, awesome, cool. Okay, cool. Thank you. Um, Right, if you could not do it in the private chat, but in YouTube, that would be awesome. Any sort of chat so that I can actually see it. Because if you're having like sort of conversations there, it's really difficult for me to. Ah, there we go, Tevo. There we go. Awesome. Thank you, Tevo. I can actually now see it properly. Okay, cool. I'm glad I could be heard properly because audio, with these things, audio and video with live streams, tends to be kind of hit and miss from time to time. So I'm glad that you guys can actually hear me. So, as I was saying, decentralized identity. Last week we just kind of had this broad kind of conversation about decentralized identity. And today we're going to be basically decomposing that. I'm going to be joined shortly by Roberto, and he and I over the week have just kind of been gradually iterating on this idea, and we're getting to a place that's really exciting. There's some challenges in there which we'll get into in a moment. So, decentralized identity. This is just to give context. This is important because um, a lot is dependent. Every sort of building block that we carry on to sort of explore in the context of all the sort of crypto bits as they fall into place is dependent on basically the representation of the human, right? And in many ways, the decentralized identity is represented by it is the representation of a human, right? As we'll go on to have a look or to see here. And one of the reasons why this is super important is, as you can see, other aspects, right? So from things that further down the line will delve into deeper. So things like tokens, for example, right? Or sort of a parent teacher improving that kind of experience, right? Sort of like lifelong learning, right? Point of sale, right? You need identity, medical documents, right? And so on and so forth. So this is really quite fundamental to all of this. And so we're going to be looking at it, again, from a sort of front end, back end perspective. And yeah, we shall break that down as we sort of go through this. Okay, let me just try and, this is a bit tricky, try and get, ooh, don't move, try and get this stuff centered. Okay, so to give a quick overview, I feel like I've been speaking for far too long, but I promise you this is just one bit where I'm sort of I'm going to give a good overview of what we're going to be talking about today, specifically as we sort of decompose um, decentralized identity. I should tell you what, at this point in time, I'll go ahead and I'll bring Roberto on. Doot, doot, doot. If I can be able to figure out how. There we go. Okay, cool. Boom. There you are. Hello, Roberto. Hey, hey,
Hello,
hey.
buddy. How you doing?
I'm good, man. Thanks for joining. I'm really looking forward to basically sort of the conversation that we're going to be able to have here. Or sort of, in a way, sort of share all what we've been talking about, over the week. And then, I suppose maybe, yeah, but not maybe, I'm sure we're definitely, we're going to learn something even in this conversation. So that's going to be really interesting. Okay, so now, um, I'll zoom out to give like a broad view of what the hell I am gonna be talking or guiding us through in terms of this conversation. So we're going to start off. Oh, come on. Okay, there we go. Okay, so we're gonna start off by here just breaking down the terms, right? So this particular paragraph, I'll zoom into it later. It just breaks down the different terms that we're going to be looking at, right? So from PGP to public key, private keys, and so on. And then here we'll sort of look into the first kind of layer of what would be needed to sort of start creating identity, right? In this kind of DIY way that we're attempting to do here. And then we'll carry on, to look into how that can then be layered upon by people sort of connecting to each other and sort of acknowledging each other. And then the third bit here is basically looking at the difference between subjects and objects, right? So like institutions and sort of like humans, so to speak. And then to finish off, we'll get into just a breakdown of the sort of the technicality, right? So basically the back end, where there we go. This is tricky to try and like figure out how it can actually fit. Okay, yeah, the back end. So looking at from the interface, once an interaction is sort of input or triggered, or an event is triggered, how that then goes all the way and touches the database, and then comes back all the way to feedback to the user. And then we'll have a look, sort of right towards the end, we'll have a look at the breakdown, which is this bit here, the breakdown of what a sort of a string of what such a query could basically look like. Roberto has sort of been doing some interesting stuff with JavaScript and metadata that we'll sort of like expand on at that point. Right, so monologue over. Let's actually just jump into it. Okay, cool. So, zoom out. Let's try and get this. There we go. Okay, so what is PGP, right? It's important to sort of have a good understanding of these terms, because as we carry on, and again, it's a good understanding which is kind of surface level to a certain extent, right? Like once we get into PGP, like the asymmetric nature of it, like we're not going to actually be like having a look at, for example, signing, right? The nature of signing digital signatures. We're not actually gonna, in this particular talk, we're not gonna be actually looking at technically what is actually going on at a low level. We're just gonna be having sort of like a high level conversation this time around. So PGP stands for pretty good privacy. It's basically sort of like public key cryptography, right? So when we talk about signing, what do we mean? We basically mean a digital signature, which is also known as sort of asymmetric cryptography, also public key cryptography. And then when we say public key, private key, what do we mean? We mean a public key is used to authenticate things like messages, basically, to provide sort of a link between a person's public identity and, in a way, the private key, right? So this key can be seen publicly and should be transmitted through a trustable channel, basically. Right. So, and then the private key is used by the individual holder to stamp / encrypt messages to send to public key holders. So, in a way, it's sort of like you can think of, in some way, a good analogy I find. Again, I might be wrong, but I find a good analogy here is like your house address, right? You don't sort of like give your house address to every single person, but those who do have, say, your house address and are able to sort of like send you packages, right? And then on top of that, you're able to have another layer of interaction with this address, which is the key to the house itself, right? So not everyone has sort of access to the house itself. So in that case, one could argue the house here is, or the address to the house is a public key, and then having the actual access to the house, or the key itself, is a private key. What would you say that that's a fair assessment?
Yeah, that's a good analogy. I also thought about the example of we have in front of our eyes every day, that are the websites and these lock in the URL in
Yeah.
the browser.
Yeah.
How that's achieved? Servers have their private keys and generate a message that you can verify it's authentic because you have the public key embedded in your browser. You can do this cryptographic algorithm to check that they match and you trust. And your source of trust or truth there, it's the browser you downloaded from another website that has this green log.
Yeah.
Again and again, your source of trust ends up being something you got through a trustable channel, a secure channel.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
the best example we have on our hands every day that I think can be analogous to the public-private key mechanism.
Yeah, yeah, that's really interesting. And what's interesting is, people use, sort of SSL encryption. As you said, like the little HTTPS, the green padlock that appears on website or on the browser's sort of URL strip. People use that, for like I suppose a lot of websites nowadays, but historically, it's been associated with things like banks, like doing online banking, right? Because you need a sort of a secure tunnel to be able to do that, and to understand simply that it's a handshake going on, right, between the browser and the server, right? As you just put there. Cool, awesome. Okay, so that's kind of like, that gives us like a good understanding in a way of terms which are going to be kind of banding about, sort of explaining them at the top, and then not having to, in a way, worry about having to re-explain them in the contexts that, oh no, that was possibly going to happen. We've been having sort of camera related problems with Roberto, so we'll just wait. Okay, there he is. Okay, there we go. Not to worry. Yes, part and parcel of the whole process. Okay, right. So, what did your? Oh my God, what just happened there? Oh, you know what? Actually, it is not the camera. It is. It is. It is. This is me thinking that it was on your end. It was actually on my end. I was hitting the space key, thinking that I'm on a different window, and that was basically triggering the last thing that I clicked on, which was disabling, and so or enabling you to come on. Then it was disabling you. Sorry about that. Okay, cool.
Learning all the
Exactly.
time.
Learning all the time, man. Okay, so now moving on to this this bit that we had a look at on a high level, right? So we're going to be having a look at the nature of there we go, let me just scroll back up, there we go. Yeah, the nature of sort of the layers of trust, right? Like Roberto said, with a browser you have this sort of chain, right? So you downloaded the browser from a website which had which had this sort of trust mechanism going. Hey James, nice of you to join us. If you could, hey guys, if you could, James, if you could channel comments via either YouTube or Periscope or wherever, that will basically help me out in terms of being able to actually read them and see them. Because at the moment, as I said, basically I'm looking at this mirrored screen and I can't be able to read the text in the private chat. It sort of creates this weird back and forth. But yeah, really glad that you could join us, James. Right, so thank you, Hova Khalida, for joining us. What is this? Just a quick overview for our new friend Hova Khalito. Basically, Proto is a program on Cast where we sort of talk about all the awesome tools that crypto enables us to utilize. Basically, as I said earlier, you've got sort of three things where it enables new means of communication, collaboration, and compensation, right? So compensation like incentives, tokens, and that kind of thing. Collaboration, right? Obviously collaboration and communication is sort of tied together, right? People are able to collaborate if they know they can be able to be compensated, and people can be able to collaborate if they can be able to communicate in the first place. So it's all kind of tied in a sort of really lovely way. And so today we're looking at one of the building blocks of the crypto environment, which is how do you create an identity which can be trusted. Yeah, I hope. Was that? What do you think, Roberto? Was that able? Was
That's
able
a
to?
good summary for the first part, and lead us directly to how we do set an initial ID. Um,
Exactly. Yeah.
what's what's enough ID for us? For example, it's a good question.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's
So we are talking about cryptography, but not like at the base level. We're talking about what cryptography enables. Say, for example, through what cryptography enables in sort of things like cryptocurrencies and sort of incentives that it sort of layers on top of that, etc. Right. So now, setting the initial ID as a first point, and then moving on to sort of set a trust anchor, so to speak. Right. So as I was saying earlier, back to this conversation. Oh man. We have this idea of a chain, right? As Roberto was pointing out, the idea that someone has to start in an environment which is trusted. So with a browser example, right? You have to download the browser from a trusted source, right? So from a website which has, the green padlock, right? And then from that, this is assuming that whatever device you're working from came with a default browser, which happens, right? So you've got Safari on Mac and Chrome on like Chromebooks, etc., and Edge and Microsoft Explorer. So being able to sort of go through that channel to download other browsers, or in this case we're talking about browser specific, to download browsers which are trusted, right? Because you've got that little green padlock at the top. It's only sort of starting from that place that you can then be able to trust any other, once you open up the browser, any other website with a green padlock, right? Because if the browser is compromised, then someone could basically just show you fake green padlocks on a whole bunch of different websites, which are not true, right? Which are not a representation of the server actually sort of doing the handshake that we spoke about earlier, right? So the chain in that is very important. And so when we come to looking at decentralized identity, this chain is also important. So like at the base level, how do you set up yourself? How do you set up your identity in a way where it's trusted, basically, right? Okay, so now that's what I mean here by sort of setting initial ID. So starting profile name slash image, basically, and sort of signing metadata, as we'll look into later, basically creating this kind of, in a way, loop where you're signing to say, hey, I am who I say I am, and I'm sending off this message onto the blockchain so that, you know, anyone can be able to actually sort of verify that I am who I say I am, and along with that, you send your public key, as we'll have a look at later. And then later on, as I said, it's sort of building up. So you already have your identity. Then what you want to do is sort of like, you know, add on bolt on bits which help emphasize or help bolster that trust, right? And again, like trust, there are multiple layers, right? So as we'll have a look as we sort of go on through this process. Okay. I keep having technical issues, which is really annoying. Okay, cool. So now let's move on to this first section, which, yeah, you have representations of the three of us, right? James here, and me here, and Roberto here, right? Just to give context, the reason why Roberto is sleeping is I wanted to just make a joke and sort of pay homage to the siesta sort of like cultural practice. Okay.
Power
Cool.
naps.
Exactly. Yeah, power naps. And then James is here, you know, his smiley, jovial self as usual. And then, you know, I'm there taking life way too seriously with my monocle and my, you know, sort of thinking face. Okay, so the idea. Exactly. Yeah, so the idea here is, so these characters would individually sign a file and add the public key and then do a transaction onto add that file onto a transaction within the metadata. So right, so when it comes to Cardano, which actually so far I've not actually mentioned Cardano. With Cardano, or even with most blockchains, you're able to have a way to add metadata, right? Which is just like whatever sort of a file that you're able to add to go along with your transaction, right? And so with Cardano, we only just sort of had that go live, and you know that opens up a whole world of opportunity, and that's, you know, one of the things that we're actually looking to sort of to leverage, yeah, to hack, to lack of a for lack of a better word, but hack it, you know, in a good way, in the gray and white hat way, not in the black hat way. So metadata, you're able to sort of like, you know, have that in a transaction itself, send it off, you know, on its merry way to this public environment, right? So on chain, you know, people can be able to have a look at it. And what's you know, what's important here is that you've got both your public key as well as you know, this signed file, so that people are able to know, you know, to sort of match the two and be like, okay, so this is the public key that I can be able to sort of like find through a different channel and be able to sort of match them up and say, okay, yes, this is a person, and so, you know, I can be able to trust that whatever file that they've signed is
Coming
from them.
from.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Awesome. Cool. So yeah. So that's what would happen in a way here to kind of create like a base foundation for identity, right? And what's in terms of implementing this, actually, do you want to speak a little bit about what you had in mind in terms of leveraging Keybase and what kind of questions that brought up?
Okay, so I wanted to try to oh, that's my camera flickering. Sorry.
Oh, okay. No, it's all right.
I'll be back in seconds.
Okay, cool.
So
yeah, I can still hear you. Yeah, so yeah, carry on.
yeah.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah, I was trying to get rid of Keybase. I mean, Keybase is a beautiful piece of software, which is not completely open source, so you cannot bring up a Keybase server tomorrow and start using it to index proofs of identities from Twitter account or your domain ownership. You cannot do that, but you can leverage PGP on your own, which is another proof of identity they index. So I wanted to make a little proof of concept of using PGP on Cardano blockchain as metadata. Also linking that that message I signed on the Cardano blockchain with my ID on Keybase. So for that, anyone can already get my public key from Keybase servers, or I could also publish my public key on my Twitter account. So anyone that trusts that identity on Twitter, that interact somehow with me at some point in time, yeah, trust that entity, which might be real or not, but trust the conversation they have. I could publish my public key there and then sign any transaction on the blockchain, so anyone could match that the transaction came from that Twitter entity. I don't know if that was clear or well explained, but what I wanted to say is that it's really important to have a trustable channel to send your public key through, because for example, Twitter or Keybase could tomorrow just bring down my account and put something else, and then anyone could think that a transaction was made by me on Cardano blockchain from this fake identity, and we have a very weak point of trust if we use these platforms to represent our public key somehow. I mean, we have a good source of truth or trust with this mechanism, but wouldn't it be cool if I give you a business card with my public key, my PGP fingerprint, long or short one, and I give it to you physically, so you know it was me, and you save it very well, and then from now on you can check any transaction on Cardano blockchain. You can check any message, any metadata, whatever it is. We can put on the blockchain events. We can put whatever we want, and you from that time you will be able to check and be completely sure that no one can fake me, my person, my identity, unless my keys are compromised and anyone can sign.
So carry on.
No, that
was that was it. Okay, so in summary, like, to summarize this, this whole particular section, the idea here is, whilst something like Keybase, for example, presents a good opportunity to sort of use PGP to sign stuff, as Roberto mentioned, it lacks the ability to sort of like add sort of layered experiences like indexing, etc. But also it's centralized in that they can just like Twitter or YouTube or Facebook, all these other services, they introduce a point of failure, a sort of single point of failure, which they can decide, if they don't like you, they can turn off your presence there, right? So this is an important sort of point to keep in mind. And so, this sort of like introduces the need for us to actually create an experience which is independent of that vulnerability at the base level, right? So, because coming back to the example of the browser, right? You download a fake browser. After that, anyone can just like tell you, oh, you're safe in
So,
all these different environments. Same thing applies with identity, right? If that is fundamentally compromised, then every other sort of subsequent interaction is basically quite poor. Actually, I'll quickly bring up this point because this our new viewer here made a very good point, which I want to highlight if I can quickly get to it, which is this. Can it be seen on screen? There we go. So Hova Carlito says, "Basically, to create a decentralized phone book." Yeah, in a nutshell, yes. But one which is like much richer, right? One is digital. There's all sorts of like really awesome stuff that you can lay on top of it, right? From right, and this kind of goes back to the conversation which we were having last week, which is your identity is tied into like fundamentally like everything, right? Your ability to find work, to find a home, to earn money, like all these different things, right? So it's like it's a phone book, but
on steroids.
exactly, exactly. That's it. Phone book on steroids, which you can't, which updates itself. Phone book, it's printed once, and um, and yeah, it's a phone book with permissions, right? So you can actually sort of, allow some people to call you, some people not to call you, etc. But with yeah, so yeah, steroids, like it's a really rich experience. So what we want here is to create an environment that has fundamental trust at the base. Now, moving on. Toot, toot, toot. Okay, we'll come back to that bit, and then after that, what we want to sort of evolve from, yeah, this bit will be actually really quick. What we want to evolve to is this idea of having those individuals use this identity that they've already set up to be able to acknowledge each other, to sort of start to create like a network, of trust, right? So in this case, this representation is, me sort of acknowledging that James is who he says he is, kind of thing, and James doing the same for me doing the same for Roberto, him reciprocating, and James and Roberto doing the same for each other, right? So that's just sort of like a second layer kind of thing. Now, yeah, we'll just quickly jump into this bit here. We can zoom in a bit. Too much. There we go. Okay, awesome. Right, so primary. So yeah, so this kind of breaks down these three different stages. We haven't quite got to the third one. We'll get to it in a bit. But we'll speak to this a little bit here. So we've got primary, secondary, and tertiary. Right. So the primary is I am who I say I am. Right. Simply put. Secondary is he is who he says he is, or they are who they say they are. Well, I suppose it's better to sort of use singular here because they, is plural as well. And then tertiary, again, yeah, they are who they say they are. So in this particular case, we're talking about entities or institutions, right? So, in this case, it could be just like an entity that's set up by like two or more people, or maybe even one person, right? Like, I think there's a whole conversation here regarding like who, like the nature of entities slash institutions and how they are set up and how they're trusted, right? My initial thinking is once sort of an entity is set up, the base level kind of like the bootloader, so to speak, for it would be humans actually acknowledging that it is what it says it is, before the entity itself is then able to then be a source of trust, to say, okay, these people or this other entity is who they say they are, so to speak, right? Right. And then now to hop into this last bit here, it's helpful to think of trust in sort of two different ways, right? We've spoken a lot about technical yeah, OCG in the chat actually brings up a really good point, which is multisig, which we're not particularly going to be getting into, but yes, this is a really really good and rich example. Multisig, for those who haven't come upon this term so far, is multi-signatories or multi-signature. It's the idea that a number of people can basically sort of be required to each say yes for to an event to basically occur. So multi-party signature. So you can imagine having a wallet, and basically, for example, family, right? Everyone within the family needs to basically sort of say okay or sort of sign and say yes for an event to occur on that wallet, right? It just sort of creates trust within a set, a predefined group of people. So yes, right. So coming back to this, we've looked at tech trust, or what I'm referring here to as tech trust, which is technical implementation, right? But we have to actually go beyond that, where the nature of trust in sort of in the analog world, right, applies to this. It's sort of like layered on top of that, and that's what I'm referring to here as time trust, which is sort of like the human sort of proof of deeds over time, right? So if you think of how people trust each other, it's basically sort of in a way through deeds over time, and that sort of like breaks down in an interesting way, because it's not particularly true that because you've known someone for the longest that's the person that you trust the most, and inversely, inversely, someone who you've known for a short amount of time, you could have a really sort of rich amount of trust with them. And also things like interactions, right? The amount of interactions that people have, Lockhart just said something in the chat which was funny. The amount of the frequency, right, counts as well, right? Because how often you're able to sort of ping someone, and that in a way is a reflection of the amount of trust that you have of them, because you're able to have an up-to-date version of of who they are, so to speak, kind of thing. Okay, so now let's quickly so I'll just quickly mention this bit here. So symbolically, humans are going to be represented by a circle, right? Sort of organic forms, and objects such non-humans are going to be represented through sort of more angular geometry, like a square. Okay, so now let's just quickly jump into this bit here. This shouldn't really last long. Like, we've basically sort of spoken about this already, which is the idea of an entity, right? So it's represented here by this kind of dotted organic form, but also by the square to basically represent the idea that it is rigid, right? It's this kind of objective entity, right? It's not sort of like an individual who is just subjective, but it's also sort of like an amorphous blob, right, which kind of evolves, and because inside of it is a whole bunch of humans, and it kind of it evolves, right? So decentralized autonomous organizations, or DAOs, are basically could be defined in this way. And the idea is like in the first bit here, James and Roberto set up an entity, and then they sort of reference me and say, okay, yeah, A is who he says he is, or he has, say for example in this context, this could be Gimbal Labs related, right? They could say, oh yes, A has taken our sort of nano degree or micro degree in this particular topic, right? He took it with us, and you can be able to certify that he does have that skill, or he did have that skill at this particular point in time. Yeah, go on.
No, that's for me, that's important in a particular point in time.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah, because skills basically sort of like evolve. Yeah, exactly. And James makes a pretty good point here. So exactly, I'll read it out. Exactly. And once trust is established, you have pretty much any option of how to apply it or when to require it. So yeah, so there are a number of factors, as Roberto said here, like time factors, right? So like if you're skilled pilot, for example, right, or even I don't know, physician even, or even I was going to say architect, but that's basically sort of actually yeah, architect as well, right? Because the standards change, right? So you need to sort of like have a way of authenticating, certifying people, which has consistent in sort of like a standard, right? Where this person is up to date with what they know and sort of the best practices, so to speak. Yeah, so basically, yeah, this is just sort of like a repeated instance of the first thing that we shall not dwell on. Okie dokie. Right, so now I see someone, this is most likely Tevo. Someone here has been sketching. Okay, cool. This will be interesting to to get into after after the stream. Okay, so now we're just gonna quickly sort of like get into this final bit here. As I spoke about at the beginning, where we talk, we sort of briefly get into the breakdown of what is happening technically, right? So again, the idea behind Proto is to look at, the sort of the human readable aspect as well as the machine readable aspect, right? So the code and in a way the paint, right? So the front end
And
and the what?
what you see in the front and the magic that happened behind the scenes.
Exactly, yeah. So like behind the
Which
curtain, so
we
to
need,
speak.
we need to make people aware that it's not magic at all, and these green padlocks are based on some sort of trust that allows you to trust now that you are doing what you are doing, who with who you are doing it with.
Exactly, yeah. Yeah, I'll just scroll a little bit here so that our octopus friend is not cropped out. Right, so okay, so here we've got sort of like two cards which in a way represent a binary representation of what's happening with identity, right? So you've got sort of identity setting, right, which evolves, which then is continuously sort of bonded to different context, right? Right. So just to quickly go through this here, we start with the front end, right? So this is the interface that the user sees, and on there they start with sort of inputting an aspect of ID, right? Which marks the start and the end, because it marks the start and end because once it goes all the way and comes back up, as these arrows here represent, the outcome is basically fed into that same input field, or where they sort of interact with. So you can think of it like a button, right? You tap a button, a button, a button, and it has like an active state, or like it tells you what it's doing, and then it feeds back, right? So input event is triggered. That then it makes a whole bunch of stuff happen on the back end, right? So the back end, you can think of it as the code. So you've got a whole bunch of logic which is happening either on the device that you're using, your phone, desktop, laptop, whatever, tablet, or it could be happening on a remote computer, right, on a server, or on a network of computers like a blockchain is, right? Basically, a blockchain is simply the ledger plus the network of computers.
Right.
Yeah, go on.
We can get from the blockchain is because this decentralized network of computers meet a consensus and agree that the data is trustable. That's what allows us to build on top things like identity, because there is no central authority or central server like Keybase ones or Twitter ones streamlining the information to you. It's a whole bunch of computers in the world working and speaking a common protocol, open protocol that anyone could audit. Yeah, that's.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. I'll quickly just sort of go through these, and then we'll jump into the last bit here because I'm aware that we've only got like 4 odd minutes to go. Okay, so what the point that Roberto made is sort of super important, and I feel like maybe in a previous session, I'll actually endeavor to have a representation of that so that people can be able to just like see, okay, so that's what blockchain is, right? It's a protocol, a consensus protocol, as well as this ledger, and what, in a way, what creates this environment of trust that we're then able to build on top of, right? So here you've got the interaction on the back end. So you've got stuff happening locally, right, which could be off-chain, right? Because with blockchains, you can have things happen off-chain, which is not within the environment that is on-chain, which is sort of like the broader global network are actually sort of referring to, right? You can sort of create these little like estuaries, which are sort of like off-chain representations. And then from that, you've got network transmission, and then this then connects to a remote computer, right? A machine which is not the one that you're working on. And then with that, that's able to do things like query the data, the on-chain database, and do all sorts of sort of like different interesting DApp stuff, right? So decentralized application stuff. And then once that happens, then it's boom, sent back all the way back to the user. Exactly. Okay, so now the final bit here. Let's see. I actually managed to get it to fit on the first go. First try. Well done, eh? Okay. Yeah. So here, basically, as I said at the top of this session, this is basically sort of like a working model. Again, like all of this is a work in progress. Or process, no, progress. And this is basically a string of what sort of a representation might look like in terms of a query. I won't sort of speak much to it. I'll just sort of let Roberto sort of expand on like the different aspects in less than 3 minutes.
Yeah. So again, what I was trying was to put my public key on chain, so anyone from that point in time to the future can check my identity. For that, we need to access metadata, and we needed somehow a content addressing mechanism, which we could use now. So we have URLs for websites, and we have URIs, which are universal resource index. No, I don't remember what the I stands for, but basically you have this type of strings which has the protocol, con / some meaningful name, which in our case will be a transaction ID on Cardano chain, containing the metadata with my public key. We have the parameters, which in this case is the network where this transaction will reside. In my case, I've been working with testnet because it's free. Another thing we need to address the metadata is the key or metadatum label, which is the official name on the Cardano improvement proposal for metadata. Yeah, I will leave the type for the end, but basically I built this test to address the transaction where I put the metadata, the public key on Cardano. So I implemented a library to handle all these parameters and protocol and present my public key in a seamless way on JavaScript. What I wanted with this is to have an easy way to share this URL to you, for example, through a secure and trustable channel like this one. I could grab a piece of paper and print that URL and say, hey, this one is my public key, save it from now on. Every message I send to you, I want you to check it against this public key that resides on the immutable database, which is Cardano blockchain. And that was my whole proof of concept for the weekend, my toy project, just to have fun. Maybe that URL makes no sense. This type HTTP response is a weird thing that I tried to do to get compression of the data that I put on the blockchain, because we have some limitations on the blockchain. That's more or less my brain dump for this.
Cool, man. Yeah, that's been really really insightful, and you know, we've not even got into things like you know, talking about how you've been able to basically like have, you know, a query, you know, sort of like transmitted over HTTP, for example, right? In you know, like really interesting sort of functionality and stuff like that. Okay, so now it makes sense for us to actually bring this to a close. It's been super awesome. What I'm gonna do now is actually I'll quickly highlight a comment here by Quasar. I think that's the one. Yeah, so Quasar says, this has been great, really awesome to see things moving on in such momentum. I could not agree more, right? Like, I've been really fortunate and really excited, you know, to be having conversations, you know, with people within the community, within the Cardano community, in building stuff, and especially like Gimbal Labs, right? You know, you guys, James, Julie, and Roberto, you know, and other guys as well. Like, for example, I had a really good conversation with Josh, you know, this week. So it's been really really awesome. Yeah. So guys, thank you for coming on. We're now going to move over to the ProjectCatalyst town hall, which I should have actually at the beginning I should have mentioned the link between the town hall and Proto, or Catalyst and Cardano and Proto, but yeah, I'll do better next time. For the meantime, yeah, if you could, yeah, if you're interested, go to cardano.ideascale.com and yeah, find out more about that. It's basically a decentralized fund where people all over the world can be able to put forward proposals and yeah, get the community to basically sort of give feedback, and you can get potential collaborators to actually realize your idea and get funding, right? So like, it's this really rich resource. And yeah, I hope that at least, even if it's not, you know, even if it's one person who's watching this, whether now live or in the future, you know, sees this and is like, oh, actually, you know, I'll go over and give it a go. Yeah, please do, and share it around. Cool. Thank you very much, guys, and see you around.
See you. Thank you.